Welcome to the video lecture series, Culture, Worldview, and Origins. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. This is part number 2 of 10 on developing my personal philosophy, my personal worldview / philosophy. And what we're doing is going to take it stage by stage of building a philosophy, building a worldview, and what that looks like and how many options are involved in each step, which makes it a very personal process. And this is where I believe it's very important, and it's something I was missing, and it's something that we usually don't get through our educational studies and career, in that somebody explained to us what and how to build a personal philosophical system so that we can filter ideas and models and different things, so that I can accept ones that agree with my belief system and reject ones that don't. I was forced, fortunately, to develop my own belief system in somewhat of a hostile environment, so it was really good for me to have to do that, and I want to share that experience now with you. We're in part number 2 of building our personal philosophy, and what it is that there is a quote by J Gould that's been kind of the guiding factor for this series. He states, "First, facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people. Theory, habit, prejudice, and culture all influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them." And again, here's the diagram of just how we invite professionals, experts in to study the world around us, and they're studying objects, but those objects become subjects when subjected to the personal influence of the expert that is studying them. That's why the glasses represent the 4 factors J Gould lists as factors that will influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them. What we've touched on is culture, and how culture is an influencing factor. I am wanting to build my philosophical system around biblical parameters, and to do so, I need to recognize that the biblical parameters come from a non-Western culture, from the Hebrew culture. And what were the important factors to understand from that Hebrew culture? One is that they were very concrete orientated, visually orientated people, and experience orientated. But on top of that, they were very orientated not towards the interior of man, but to the exterior of man. And that would mean that they're externally authority regulated, is that their external authority to them was what they went to. They did not have the cultivated interior authority to make decisions, to do things on their own. As Westerners, we are cultivated to be self-motivated, to be self-reliable and self-responsible, and when we become of age, we're on our own. That is not a non-Western concept. That is very Western. The non-Western concept is very dependent, in that they stay dependent upon the family and the authority structure of the family and the external authority structure of the community. And so what we're looking at here is that culture is very important. Culture is what gives me a tendency to believe, where is the authority? Is it external or internal to myself? For a non-Western, it would be external. And if it is external, then a lot of them are believers in God, a type of God, or at least in the spirit world, as external powers. And being such, they believe also in an open system, meaning that the whole system, the galaxies, the universe, the earth, functions not by by laws, not by things that are set in a closed manner that is always this way, it is uniform. No, they believe in an open system that is not uniform, that can be influenced by different spiritual powers. And so they are very open system, very open system minded, whereas we Westerners believe more in a closed system. Even though we might be Christians, evangelicals, we struggle with miracles, we struggle with things that the Bible talks about as happening, where the Hebrews accepted it, and that's what we believe, because they were cultivated with that kind of thinking pattern. So that's the kind of pattern that I need to adopt when I am coming and using biblical parameters. I can't use biblical parameters and apply my Western thinking unless I don't care about the original intent. If I'm just trying to take biblical parameters and make something else of it, then that's fine. But I'm trying to get to the original intent and apply the original intent to my way of thinking. So we've gone over culture, and culture is very important. The next one we're going to go over is prejudice. Now, prejudice does not mean something of a negative term in this sense. It's a term that just describes how we come to thinking. Before we can judge anything, before we can separate ideas, we have to have a prejudgment, a prejudice. We have to have a filter. We have to have a mental framework in place to be able to judge. So prejudging, that is the name or the idea of prejudice in this idea. And so now we're going to look at the prejudices. We're going to start looking at formulating our prejudices. And what would be our prejudices? Well, looking at the house again, we're going from culture now, and we're going to the foundation of the house. And the foundation of the house, number one, is what is our source of reliable knowledge? What do you mean by that? Well, we have to choose where we believe reliable knowledge can come from. And we just choose it. We don't have a basis for really choosing it, but our cultural tendency is going to give us an inclination of what to choose. And that's our epistemology, is our source of knowledge. What is our source of knowledge? Well, what are the possible sources? Well, in epistemology, what would be my source of reliable knowledge? Generally, there are 4 recognized sources that we can choose from. Now, some universities might have a few more sources. They might have different names on them, but these are the 4 broad categories of sources. And here they are. Number 1 is intuitive source, intuitive knowledge. And what's intuitive mean? Intuitive means inside the mind of each person, but not really inside the mind, inside maybe the heart area. So it's not something that's reasoned, it's direct knowledge that the person receives somehow. And so it's just intuitive. How do you know it's right? I just know. Okay. That's intuitive knowledge. That's one source. The second source, authoritarian knowledge. That would be external to myself. That would be an authority outside of me that tells me what is true, what is not, and that I can get knowledge from. That source can be anything external that we put as an authority. So that could be a teacher, that could be a president, that could be a sports figure, that could be God. That could be a number of things, whatever we look to outside of ourselves for truth, and that we give the authority to that object. So that is authoritarian knowledge. 3 is logical knowledge. Logical knowledge is built on human reason. What is logical to believe? Well, what is logical to believe is what we can reason and what is reasonable for us to believe. So that is logic. So it's internal, but it's upstairs, it's reason-based, it's intellectual, it's worked out through formulas of logic. That is logical knowledge. Last one is empirical knowledge. Now, empirical or empiricism has to do with the 5 senses, okay? So it's like through observation. So Some people would believe that the only true knowledge comes from experiments, comes from observing the world. True knowledge, they would say, does not come from intuition. That's in the mind, but it's not based on wisdom or whatever. It's just comes. It's not authoritarian knowledge outside, and it's not logical knowledge. It's outside knowledge that comes to us through experiments. So those are the four sources. So we're building our house, and we got to put the foundation down. What is your source? What would you choose within those four? What is your preference? Okay, now, preference is our cultural tendency. If we were trying to build a non-Western house of thinking, what would be the non-Western choice of those four? Well, number one is internal. It's a feeling. Number three, logical, internal, is thinking. Number four is internal. It's perceptions that are being interpreted by me. So three of them are internal. Would a non-Westerner pick internal? No, not generally. So what would be theirs? Theirs would be number two, which would be the authoritative knowledge. And so that is what I'm going to choose. I'm going to try to go with, understanding that I have to submit and subject my ideas and myself to an outside authority. Now, what's important is to choose an outside authority that we believe is credible and is true. And so that's a step by faith. So what we're doing here is we are choosing our source. That is our prejudice. We're prejudiced because our cultural tendency is going to have us choose by preference one of the sources. Can we choose any of those sources by reason? No, because you haven't chosen reason yet. You have to then choose a source by faith. And so you are stepping out, I am stepping out, and we're choosing our major source, our primary source of reliable knowledge. So what is it? Which one do you choose? It's up to you, and it's up to me. We choose it, but what we choose will affect the whole rest of the house, because we go back to that source always for reliable knowledge. And that source controls and governs what we can accept and reject later on as fact or fiction. I am building my thought processes on biblical knowledge, on biblical parameters. And so I go back to the Hebrew authors, go back to the Hebrew culture. And the Hebrews took this to mean that Genesis, going back, Genesis 1:1, this is the deciding factor. My source of reliable knowledge is as revealed in special and general revelation. Okay, so my source of knowledge is going to be God. I choose the God of the Bible, the God of the Hebrews, as the supreme creator God, as the God of gods, Lord of lords. I choose him, and is he knowable? Okay, well, that's what we're going to find out a little bit later on in the next series on metaphysics, is that my God is knowable through revelation. He has revealed himself. It is an open system. The Hebrews had an open system. And so God was able to reveal himself within that system through special and general revelation. What's that mean? Is that he revealed himself specially when he directly revealed himself. That is through the prophets. That is through the apostles. That is through what they wrote down. Now we have those recordings, and that is special revelation. General revelation is through that which God has created. And so that's what Romans talks about, is that we're able to know him through what he has created. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In whatever system, a thought process that we make, we have to assume something is eternal, something is true, something is basic, a basic belief. In this system is God. God is the internal. God In the beginning, God existed. How do we know? Where did he come from? Well, that is what is written and what we have to assume as is true. We can assume the opposite, that God does not exist, God is not eternal, and God is not available. But that also is an assumption based on our beginning of building our system. So I choose Genesis 1:1. Okay, that's my source. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Do I believe that God created the heavens and the earth because I believe that the creation demands or requires a creator? And it's kind of like, no, not really. Why? Well, because my primary assumption is God, in that he does exist. And as part of his existence, it says he then created. And so that's what I believe. And I look at creation not trying to prove God exists, but I look at creation showing that, reflecting the properties of God, what God is like. Now, today's creation does not reflect all of that perfection, because there is an event that happened that I believe in biblically. Following the thing is that after Adam and Eve's sin, there was a curse upon that creation and evil entered in. Death entered in. And so the creation we have today is not the creation that God had originally created as perfect. The Hebrews, they took this to mean that God exists and that he created a literal heavens and earth. And we're going to get into that a little farther down in the metaphysics, is that what is real. And for the Hebrews, their assumption is God is real, he exists. And what he created now also exists. It did not exist before he created it. But it does exist now. And those parameters are what do control me, because I am now a part of this physical world. And I cannot escape the parameters of that physical world just by denying that physical world doesn't exist. The world exists. And if I'm going to do biblical parameters, I need to follow the Hebrew line of thought, in that, yes, God does exist, and what he created, they literally believed exists also. This is the second lecture series. We're going step by step. So the first one was to recognize the cultural tendencies that are beneath the house. Then we have chosen, which makes it our prejudice, our reliable source of knowledge. What is my source? My source I chose was number 2, which was authoritarian knowledge. What do you choose? And as Christians, we should subject ourselves to the authority of Scripture, authority of God. But what's crept into the church today and into many seminaries is they have traded. They are no longer under the authority. They are now, many of them, under intuition. And that is what we need to watch out for. And that is what we need to sound the alarm of, is that if we're following biblical parameters, and we say we are, then we need to submit ourselves to that authority, to that external authority, which would be God and his revelation. Thank you for accompanying me. We're Tim and Holly, and we're going to be marching on. We have 10 different lecture series here. We're on number 2, so I hope you stay with me and that you join me for number 3 that's coming. Thank you.